everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Actually I'm Not Okay, but I'm working on it. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of people shy away from, a topic that people are ashamed to speak about. But before we dive into what we have to speak about today, I want us to meet everyone in the studio today. With me in the studio, I have Desiana, I have Nicole, I have Friday, and Michelle. How's everyone feeling today?
Good.
Feeling good.
Hi, listeners.
Feeling good.
Yes, today it's a rainy day, and then how does everyone feel about the weather?
A good day to be in.
A good day to be in, indeed.
Well, for me, the weather was a little on the damper side. Just waking up to the rain, although it's well needed, it could make you feel a little like staying inside and, just want to watch TV and do nothing.
That's how I felt today. I didn't want to get out of my bed, but here we are. So, listeners, today we're going to be speaking about a topic, like I said, people are ashamed to speak about. It's our topic for today is breaking the silence about mental health stigma. How does everyone feel about, I know a lot of people carry on like they are okay, even when they are not okay. They are so ashamed to tell other people how they really feel because they feel like they're going to be stigmatized. They feel like people are going to judge them. They are ashamed to express themselves and exactly how they feel mentally.
Michelle, you're so right. Before we have the guests, talk about how they feel about mental health and the stigma that's surround them in our society today, and religiously wise and cultural wise, stigma is just a big taboo, right? Nobody wants to talk about mental health because of the stigma it carries, right? So I think this is such an important topic to explore because somebody out there might be going through mental health and the stigma around it might preventing them from getting the help that they need. So let's talk about it. Let's explore it. Let's share with the listeners, the stigma, and let's break that cycle.
Absolutely. But before we go in there, I think we should talk about what stigma really is. I would like our listeners to tell me what they feel like stigma is exactly. Nicole, can you please share what you feel or what you know about stigma?
So definitely when it comes to culturally and religious wise, there is a negative connotation when it comes to mental health. Culturally, Black people are, entrenched around the thought that therapy, there's a stigma behind therapy, and, you admitting that you have a mental health diagnosis, you're crazy, you're deranged, or that we don't need to do that. Black people don't go to therapy. We're not really that crazy. That's a lot of what has been spoken about. And then on the religious side, there's a stigma or taboo that says if you have to go outside of the church to seek help, to seek, some sort of support, that it's counterintuitive to your faith, that you are not, it's contradictory to your faith, that, all you need is Jesus, you don't need therapy. But au contraire, my friends, God created people, and he created the mind for people to have support. There are people on the earth that are meant to help us. So the stigma is it's always a negative connotation. It's never a good thing. It's never, embraced.
Thanks for sharing, Nicole. So Mr. Friday, would you like to tell us what you know about stigma?
So basically, I see stigma like a situation where people give you a name, either because what they don't what you do or the way you act or behave does not resonate with the way they want it to be, and then they label you with different kinds of names. Sometimes, for the most part, they give you names that are worse than what you're really passing through. And then on the other end too, they give it a name that is less than what you're passing through for real. But the bottom line is, whatever it is that you're going through, it is you and you alone that truly know how it feels. But definitely people look at you differently.
Thanks for sharing. So Desiana, can you tell us, from a clinical point of view, what your experience with stigma has been like talking to patients or clients?
Well, from a clinical point of view, there is a lot of times that patients or clients, because as you know, I work in both settings, where I deal with patients and I deal with clients. So interchangeable, I will refer to patients or clients sometimes. Someone will come to me and, just talk about what they've been going through, right? And how long it took them before they could get the help that they need. And just share that, with my culture, it wasn't okay for me to speak about what I'm going through. Point in case, depression, right? A lot of people go through depression, but they don't look at it as clinical depression. And you could be going through you could be clinically depressed, right? Because sometimes you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like getting out of bed. You just feel like you want to stay in bed. You want to take all the lights off. You just want to stay there. You want to wrap yourself around. And guess what? Your mom come upstairs. You might be a school-age person or an elderly person. Your mom or your partner or your wife, someone, you may come and they say, why are you being so lazy today? Right? So they start judging you already automatically. They're not thinking that mentally you can take or get yourself out of the bed. Right? So once you hear you're lazy, that automatically stigmatizes you. Like, I'm not a lazy person. I'm just not feeling up to par getting out of bed. So yeah, there's a lot of people that delay in care, delay in getting the help they need because somebody just automatically judge them and they feel like, I don't want to be labeled as such and such.
Thanks for sharing. So, for the purpose of the people who do not understand what stigma is, so stigma, to break it down, would be like Nicole said, a negative label or negative connotation people or stereotype that people or assumptions that people have about a certain person, like this that makes them feel unworthy or different from other people. So yes, I like how we all, give the audience the nitty-gritties of what stigma may look like to them, because a lot of people do not know that the fact that I do not want to talk about this mental health issues, it's probably because I don't want to be stigmatized. They may label it as something else, but just for the purpose of enlightening our listeners, we got to let them know that the reason why some of us are ashamed to tell people that we're having this mental health feelings or experiencing mental health issues is because we're afraid to be judged. We are ashamed of letting people, label us like crazy, psycho, because that's like the in thing. When people feel like other people, or when people see that people are going through, mental health crisis, they label them as psycho, crazy. This person is harmful. This person is, very, very, what's the word now? Unstable. Yes, this person is unstable. This person is very harmful to the society. So yes, I think because of all those labels, people are afraid to say, like, look, this is exactly what I'm going through.
No one wants to be judged, right?
Sure.
No one wants to be judged. So we put on this facade and we put on this face knowing that we need help, but we wouldn't say we need help because we don't want to be judged by either society or our community or, the people around us or friends. So we just go around pretending that everything is okay when we're not.
Right.
Right. So in my own opinion, as a man, I think there are certain basic things that makes people, don't want to talk about mental health. Part of the reasons could be one, being judged. So sometimes there are certain things you do, or there are certain ways you feel. If you decide to open up to tell people how you feel, the way you feel, people look at you like you're weak. A typical example is when a young man asks a girl out and the girl refuses, for instance. Instead of having that conversation with friends so that they can tell him what next to do or what he didn't do right, they prefer to keep it alone, and it becomes a burden on them. But when they discuss it with people, it makes them have more skills. It makes them understand that they are not just the only ones that are going through that situation. Other people have gone through it before, and they came over it, And then sometimes too, the financial risk, especially for those that are working. If you go to your boss, for instance, and tell them that you have a burnout, either because of excessive workload or too much of responsibilities, or too much, and I mean, unrealistic targets that are set. When you go out saying some such things to your superiors at work, they will probably fire you because they will think, okay, you're no longer ready for this work, or you're no longer, capable of doing it. So let's give the opportunity to someone else. So at the long run, one ends up, over killing themselves, by continue keeping on when the reality is it's time for you to get rested, you know. And then sometimes what makes people shy, I mean, keep away from talking about these issues of mental health, it's like for the social and cultural aspect of it, sometimes uh, men are believed to be people that are very strong, so sometimes an emotional circumstance happens, like the loss of a family member. Ordinarily you feel it so hard, you want to cry, but when it comes to your mind that you're a man, you're not supposed to cry in public, you keep it to yourself and you punish yourself over it. And then guess what? Something else comes to your mind that tells you you should be consoling other people. But the reality is you are the one that should be consoled. But for the fact that you have already taken that position of being a man, you die in silence, you know. And then sometimes too, the invisible nature of mental health issues, it's hard for you to explain sometimes. It's dealing with you, but you don't know how to say it out. For the most part, if you go to people and you try to say what you're talking about, it happens the first time, it happens the second time. For the third time, when you're coming, they'll be like, he's coming again with these issues, you know. So the invisible nature of these feelings sometimes it makes one uncomfortable talking about them because you wouldn't really know how to express what you're really going through. And then I think the last thing I would love to talk about is fear of being a burden. So sometimes when you tell people how you feel, let's say you say you're depressed, and because you're depressed, you don't want to go to work again, or they should just give you time for you to be on your own. The next thing that comes to people's mind is, oh, if this guy stops going to work, that means we'll be the ones feeding him, we'll be the one paying his bills. And then they begin to act a certain way with you, which might not sit right with you. And that will probably put you in a worse condition. So by the time you try to figure all of this in your head, it becomes more problems than you truly think. And this is why a whole lot of men they're just what they are. And then for the most part, it doesn't end well. So in my opinion, I think these are most of the reasons why we as men don't really talk about mental health issues.
Thanks for sharing, Friday, because it gave me another perspective of why people internalize their issues. And then thanks, I really appreciate the fact that you touched on, different aspects of the reasons why people could, be shying away or be ashamed of speaking about their issues. But it brings me to the next question I want to ask. I want to ask, where does this stigma come from? Like, what gave birth to people feeling, I'm going to be stigmatized? Nicole?
I think, cultural pressures and, just society just having the belief that we have to have it all together. I think, from my culture, it was always you keep whatever happens in the house, you don't talk about it outside. So, if within everyone inside is experiencing the same trauma, we're not going to see it from the same lens. Like, in fact, this dysfunction is not okay, and I'm not okay because of it, but I can't go to you guys because no one else is seeing what I'm seeing. So I have nowhere to turn because I would get, punished if I talk about it outside. I would, be looked at because I am now seen as being disloyal because I'm telling my family business to someone that's not part of the family. So I think a lot of it, but most importantly, ignorance in a sense of not understanding mental health, right? Because we all don't recognize and see the signs. And, you mentioned earlier about saying that people will, consider you lazy because you can't get out of bed, but not knowing that that's a form and a sign of depression, and that is chemically something that people cannot do. Their brain does not allow them. Their brain is shut down to the point where they can't get up and get out of bed. And I just think that, where this society has this pressure on us that we have to portray an image that we have it all together. And anytime you come out of that and you break out of that norm, you're seen as, something is wrong with you. And so what, Friday, I think you said it best, when whatever you are experiencing is outside of what other people's expectation of you is, then, that's where the disconnect comes in. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing. How do you think religion contributed to stigmatization?
Have a little experience about religion. When I say religion, I happen to come from a country where people are so spiritual. Let me put it that way. So many people spend more time praying rather than acting. So, and for the most part, I think I've read part of it in the Bible, but people may misconstrue what the Bible says. So for the most part with religion, most people, as a matter of fact, view mental health issues as
Demonic.
Like demonic. How do I put it?
Somebody's
There's
possessed.
a technical possession that someone is possessed.
Right.
But the reality is that is not just what it is. It started somewhere and keeps growing if unattended to. And then it gets to a point where it gets out of hands. That is just the truth about it. But spiritually, a lot of people, like from the part of the world where I come from, they see it as being possessed, like you are demonic. Something strange has gone into you that is controlling you and making you act the way you act.
Or perhaps you did not pray enough, you don't believe in God enough, you did not act right. God is punishing you for something you have done in the past or something. Exactly.
If we go into spiritual and religion, I heard you said in your community or where you grew up, a lot of people is spiritual. And I know a lot of people read the Bible and follow the Bible, to gain that spiritual insight. If they do go deep, David was depressed, right? There is a portion of scripture in Psalm that where David said, "Why thou my soul so quiet within me?" And he was actually speaking to his soul. So if we got to really go into the Bible, as you say, and spirituality and religious belief, that was something they could go to and say, well, he had to get help, right?
But how did he get the help though?
He had counselors around him that he talked to.
Thank you.
He had people around him that he talked to.
Absolutely.
Right? He had the prophet that came around him that he talked to, right? He prayed, but he also shared with other people. So then we have to learn to do the same. If you say, your community and your culture is following this spiritual guideline, right? They need to not just look at it like just one-sided, but as a whole. And that's just the only take I wanted to just put out there, that like we go deep into that whole spiritual thing. We pray, but we forget that the people within the Bible that we're following and looking up to do experience those things. Correct. Right? Correct. And did have to seek help, not only spiritually, but to the people around them. Share their stories, talk about it. He was able to write it in there so we can see.
Desiana, what I'm hearing you say is that the more people talk about people, like to counselors, like the more you speak about it in the families, in the churches, in the schools, it loses, stigma loses its grip. That's what that's what you're trying to say.
Yes, because one of the thing, when you start breaking the cycle, is speaking to someone, right? Speaking to either the pastor, speaking to someone within the society, talking about it. Once you start talking about it, then you start breaking that cycle, right? So the best form of breaking stigma is to talk, educate, share.
I related with what you said initially when you said social support. Talking about the social support, I was just trying to relate it with harm reduction. Like I said initially, the part of the world where I come from, people expect you to be disciplined on your own. It's your responsibility. Like if you're taking alcohol, for instance, it's your responsibility to know that a bottle is enough for you, or 2 bottles, But when you go beyond that, people look at you like, that's on you. You're crazy. Why would you do more than what you should, So the reality is, people do what they do because of a particular thing on the background that we all may not have seen. So, which is what brings us to what I call trauma. We should be trauma informed. So something leads to something that makes somebody act the way they act. So now, bringing it back to what we are saying, if social support can go into mental health issues, just like the kind of support or understanding we are beginning to have wrapped around harm reduction for those with SUDs, I think it's going to go a long way in helping a lot of people, because so many people are having or passing through what they are passing through because of a circumstance that they had in private or maybe in public or wherever that may not resonate well with them. So I think there's a need for us to put all of this into perspective.
I'm so happy that you brought up that topic, Michelle. I'm so happy that you talk on social support, and that Friday you went into it and you talk about how substance use, is one of the causes for people to just deal with those stigmas, those trauma, those mental health shame, by using substances to cover it up instead of seeking the proper help they need, because those are negative coping skills, right? As therapists, we try to give them positive coping skills, and you touched so perfectly on that, talking about the social support, because that comes with psychoeducation, right? Psychoeducation is a big part of breaking that stigma, is a big part of sharing with people, letting them know that it's okay. And if people have social support, if they can go to their churches and talk to their pastor, if they can go to the community and talk to the community leader, or talk to any group or social group that they may be going to, and let them know that this is what I'm experiencing. And that person could say, well, it's okay to get the help that you need. That's the first step in breaking the stigma of mental health.
I also want to point out that even in the families, as parents, because, sometimes our children look up to us and then they're like, if my father is telling me I can't cry, that means I can't cry. So I think as parents, we should model the fact that, look, we should learn to tell our kids, it's okay not to be okay. Mental health issues, let's not begin to normalize this issue, so that, because we are role models to a lot of people. And then even in the workspace, as leaders, because I guess all of us here are on the leadership table, right? As leaders, we should always give our subordinates the space to talk about burnout, to say, hey, you know what, today I'm feeling burned out, without them being judged, and then so that they are not performative about being okay. Because when we make them feel it's okay not to be okay, they can come to us with things like, I'm not okay. Because sometimes a lot of our employees or subordinates do not want to tell us they're not okay, because they feel it's going to truncate the trajectory of their careers, So I think giving them the space to know that even though you're not okay, we're not truncating the trajectory of your career. You can still be who you want to be, irrespective of the way you're feeling. Yes, we're going to give you the space to express yourself. Like, again, the more we normalize these things, the more the stigma loses its value.
Right. I agree. I think that, a friend of mine told me a few years ago, our church in Harlem was doing a whole mental health seminar, and they opened up, support, and they were offering mental health first aid classes to their congregation as a way to kind of help and recognize that when you encounter people, whether they be people in your family or strangers in the street, that mentally are not okay, that you are equipped with some level of skill set to be able to manage it, that it's not, so that there are more people that can feel comfortable. And I think that needs to be brought into the workplace as well. The more that we equip people, just like you said, Friday, if we handle this in the same way as we handle substance use disorders, and recognize that harm reduction is a model when it comes to managing, that we don't expect people to just stop and, quit, tomorrow, that we recognize that in terms of therapy, in terms of treating mental illness, that it's not something that can just be managed and just treated right away, but that there are steps and there's different models towards the same goal. So I think, bringing mental health first aid as part of a requirement when it comes to, different forms of careers whether it be in the office, whether you're in social services, whether you are, mechanics in a car shop, wherever you are. But I think the more that we offer those resources and equip people with that, then I think that we will have a larger group of people that feel safe enough to express how they're feeling. Most people want to just know that, even if they don't have the language for how they feel, because Friday, you said it best, that some people don't even know how to express what they're feeling. But just to be able to say, you know what, actually, I'm not okay. This is how I've been feeling. And then we can kind of like rally around that and figure it out and say, well, you know what, it's okay to not be okay, but let's figure out how to get you to a better place.
And I'm so glad all of you, just give that point of view. But I'm sitting here and I'm just hearing all of the things that people are facing and the ways that we can seek help. But are we providing a safe space? As Michelle said, as leaders, are we giving our employee that safe space, knowing that if they come to us and tell us that this is how I'm feeling or this is what's going on? Because I know the audience is thinking that to themselves, like, yeah, you guys are saying all of this, but when I tell you guys, would you go back and tell somebody? Would you label me? Would you? Right? So are we giving them that safe space? So as much as we're providing all of the resources and as much as we're telling them, we also need to assure them that when they come to tell us about it or tell someone about it, it needs to be in a safe space, because being in a safe space will have them express themselves more, get deeper into why they're doing what they're doing and why they're not seeking the help that they're seeking. And we need not to judge them. So let it start from us here as leaders. Like when, people come to us and tell us something, we give them that safe space.
To dismantle the stigma.
To dismantle.
Sure.
Yes.
I agree with you all completely. But I just need to add one thing. I hear us talking about our subordinate. But for the most part, the leaders actually go through a lot more than what the subordinates go through.
Yes.
Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown.
Example is,
That's
your subordinate is assigned a particular task to do, but a leader is assigned the task of all of those people. So there's so much on the leader than even on the subordinates. So the point I'm trying to make is, if we could create a condition, in workplaces where everybody could come around once in a while, just tell us what your problem is for now, mentally. What is it that you're not comfortable with?
So your mental health
just make it like an exercise, let it be embedded in all, maybe curriculum, school curriculum, work schedules, and things like that. If we could do that, I guess it's going to improve a lot of things. It's going to help us know more about ourselves.
I like that.
I really do.
So leaders, please, let's try to incorporate what Friday said. Yes, you're an owner of a company, you own an organization. I think it's very imperative that you check in with your staff once in a while to know how they're doing. And like he said, incorporate those extracurricular activities to know where your staff are mentally. I think that's a good one.
And also, Michelle, I like that. It's just so, so deep, Friday. I love that, because not only in the workplace, but at home, you are the leader of your home, right? As the mom, as the dad, as the auntie, as the uncle. Are you giving your children that safe space? Are you giving your spouse that safe space? Right? It starts from the home. The cycle needs to be broken from the home. We are the first contact. Right?
Sure.
Parents are the first contact. Aunties and uncles, right? Are we giving our children that safe space to say, if somebody abused them, we don't brush them off, but we give them that space to just say the truth, right?
So I think genuinely asking someone, are you okay? Or no. We shouldn't ask, are you okay? We should ask, how are you really feeling? Genuinely. I think that's a very good one. When you ask someone genuinely, how are you really feeling? The person tends to, it tends to break those walls that they've created, in front of themselves. And then it makes them express how they're feeling, So, before we wrap up, I would like Desiana to tell us, how we as clinicians can assist people with breaking the stigma and what it would really look like for them.
Okay. So Michelle, yes, I think it's very important to talk about breaking that stigma and getting the help for those who is viewing right now and need to know, like, so what should I do? The first thing is psychoeducation. It starts with you. So you heard the podcast, you heard about all the things that is going on, and you're saying to yourself, well, I'm here and what should I do next? Psychoeducation. Tell somebody, hey, it's not okay to call somebody like psycho. It's not okay to tell somebody they're lazy because they can't get out of bed. Ask them, are you okay? Right? Educate them. Maybe you might have depression. Maybe you might want to talk to somebody, right? If you're a mom and you're listening, right? And your child comes to you and telling you something that sounds peculiar, listen, tell me more, say more about it, right? So you don't start judging them. You just listen, because psychoeducation is the biggest thing in breaking stigma. Then once you get that person to listen to you and you realize there is a problem, then you get them the help that they need. Because once they get the help that they need and they get to counseling, there is things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where we help that person to change their mind patterns, the way they think, to restructure their thought pattern, to listen to them, to help them to view things differently, right? Then ACT, we go into, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, where you look at your value. What is important to me, right? What am I going through right now that I'm too ashamed of, but it's important to me, that I need to tell somebody, that I need to look at it from my perspective. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but I think the first step is to educate yourself on mental health. Educate yourself on that. Right now I'm not okay. Talk to maybe your pastor, talk to someone in the community, talk to your parents. Don't just keep that shame and stigma to yourself.
Okay, so I'll also add to what Desiana said. Desiana touched on psychoeducation, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and the ACT. You know, it's very important that you accept that I'm feeling this way. And I'll also like to add the social learning and then the narrative theory, because social learning, like I mentioned earlier, we as models, our children or people look up to us, you know, as role models. So I think the more the role models talk about mental health, the more people are going to be like, you know, they will begin to normalize it. And then the narrative therapy, like when you're narrating the story, like, okay, you know what, this is what is really going on. I am feeling really anxious, or I'm experiencing feelings of anxiety. You cannot just label yourself, you know, take yourself, separate yourself from these labeling. I'm not bipolar. I'm experiencing feelings of, you know, symptoms of bipolar, but does not mean you're bipolar. So I think it's very important that you separate yourself from labeling yourself as though you are, you know, bipolar, depressed. You know, I'm experiencing feelings of depression. Yes, because my moods are all over the place. However, does not mean you're depressed. Okay. So I think labeling and separating yourself from labeling is very, very important as well.
If I could just add one thing, because we all have our levels of capacity. And so I just want to say, for anyone out there that has received information, if someone comes to you and sees you as a trusted individual and they are laying something heavy where they're saying that they're not okay and you don't have the capacity to manage it, it is not a failure on your part. But what is best to say is, I don't have the answer, but I can help you find the resources or someone who can, because it is okay for you to not to know everything. Some people are dealing with their own stuff and it's hard for them to manage all of those emotions, right? So if you don't have the skills, if you weren't trained, you may not know what to do, but you can help that person by finding someone who can.
Yeah.
So with the resources that we have down in the comment section and in the body of this video, please just share that and keep that, because whatever you know, you can pass on to someone else.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks for sharing.
So in my own opinion, mental health issues are real. They are real. And the earlier we realize that these things are real, the earlier we'll get ourselves better. Because for the most part, most people are not at maximum productivity. Not because they were created to be so, but because along the line, a little issue came up that we didn't really know how to handle. And then it brought them down to the drain. And this is where we are. So, but hopefully, if we begin to treat these issues, you know, the way we should, by caring, by listening, by, you know, giving
Offering
whatever
support.
kind of support we can, socially and otherwise, I think we could get ourselves to where we should be as humans.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So thank you, listeners, for listening to us today. And remember, seeking help does not make you weak. It just makes you human. So talk to that person today, because remember, our episode was on stigma and mental health, right? Talk to somebody, because the more we talk about these things, the more the stigma loses its hold on us. See you next time, guys, and have a very great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.